let's start. Let's just make a few announcements about some forthcoming talks. So on the 14th of March, which is Thursday, there is a seminar by Dr. Ilyas Hussain from Jamia on Jawaharlal Nehru and the language policy of Republican India. And on the 14th of March again at 5 p.m. There's another talk by Ms. Vrinda Grover. There's a panel discussion with Ms. Vrinda Grover, Dr. Uma Chakravarti and Ms. Rosemary Guvichu on gender violence and the search for justice. And on the 15th and the 16th of March, on Friday and Saturday at 9 a.m., there's a conference. It's in association with Dr. Bangya Mukhya from the University of Hyderabad, and the conference is titled Rethinking Deccan History, Religion and Culture through History in Remaking and Fashioning Regional Identities. So we'll begin by introducing our speaker today, who's Professor Srinivasan, and he's the chairman of the Vivecha Center for Climate Change at the Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru. And Professor Srinivasan was a lead author of the second and fourth IPCC reports on climate change and a review editor of the third IPCC report on climate change. He was the principal scientist of the Indo-French satellite mission, which was known as MEGA Tropiques, launched on the 12th of October 2011. He is the author of one book and has published more than 100 research papers in thermal sciences, climate sciences, and solar energy. So today his talk is titled, How Should India Deal with Climate Change?
I would like to first thank Professor Rangarajan for inviting me to give this talk. In this talk, I may tend to sometimes get too much into science because that's my interest. So pardon me if I sometimes getting this out in too much detail. But the main purpose of the talk is to try to dispel some of the confusion which exists in relation to climate change. You find in many forests in India, almost every problem we face in this country is adverse climate change. And there's also a confusion between global climate change and local climate change. Because you must remember that global climate change is caused by certain factors, but local is due to a number of factors. And if you don't differentiate between these two, you will be asking for the wrong kind of solution. Now, to begin with, if you look at the global mean temperature of the last 110 years, you see that if you look at any 1 year's temperature, it goes up and down. There are system is not a system which has lots of chaos in it. So if you start looking at great detail, you might feel that situation is not that simple. But really, if you look at the what we call decadal mean, 10-year mean, you can see clearly over the last 50 years, the global mean temperature has steadily gone up by at least 0.6 degrees. But look at the last 10 years, there has been no warming almost. So there are people asking questions about, is it possible that global warming is not happening and maybe what happened in the past is due to some of the reason. But it's important to remember that this is only one metric to measure global warming. There are others which are more useful. And the best way to look at whether the present global warming is due to human beings or other causes is to look at the views of experts. So notwithstanding the kind of media coverage on this issue, where they seem to give the impression that there are two sides, but really there's only one story, that is that the global warming is caused by human beings, and 97% of the people who work on this area believe that it is caused by human beings. Of course, there are a small number of dissidents which will be there in any area of science who may have some doubts about whether all of it is caused by human beings. Now, the really strong evidence of global warming in addition to temperature is the way the sea ice is melting in the Arctic. And you can see that in the last 30 years, in which we have high quality satellite data, we have seen the amount of ice volume decrease from around 21,000 kilometer cube to below 8,000 in 2009, and last year it went below 4,000. So this is clearly the strongest evidence we have of large warming causing melting of sea ice in the Arctic, and there is a belief that in the next couple of years, Arctic may be almost ice-free for the first time in the last maybe 10,000 years. And we want to look at the primary cause for this warming. We have to look at the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as measured from ice cores and as measured today by accurate instruments. You see that during the last ice age, which was 20,000 years ago, the amount of carbon dioxide was around 200 parts per million, and then the ice age ended and the Earth warmed naturally, not due to human process, and it went up to 280 in about 10,000 years ago when the ice age ended. So in the last 10,000 years here, you see that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere remains fairly steady up to the industrial revolution time, when it just shot up from there to presently close to 400 parts per million. So the reason this figure is being shown is to point out that not only the amount of change that we see the last 150 years is larger than what was seen naturally, the rate of change is unprecedented. Rate of change of this magnitude has not been seen in the Earth's history. And the consequence of that we are going to see in the next 100 years. This is a temperature plot now. In the last ice age, temperature was around 3 to 4 degrees below the present, and then it wound up slightly as the ice age ended. Then during the long period in which agriculture thrived so nicely, temperature remained fairly constant with slight cooling. But again, in the last 150 years, it's gone up by around 40 degrees, and the way it is going, we are heading towards the way we are going today. We are heading towards something of order 4 to 5 or 6 degrees warming, depending on what action we take today. So what will happen in the future partly depends on what action we take in the next 10 to 20 years. And again, to highlight the fact that both the amount of warming and the rate of warming is unprecedented, this complicated graph shows the rate of warming on the x-axis and the amount of warming on the y-axis, and showing various past events of warming going back millions of years. And this is what's going to happen with in the next 100 years, and that is unprecedented both in terms of the amount of warming and the rate of warming. That is the hallmark of this phenomena that we are watching. Now, if you look at the last 10 years, where there is no progress in the negotiations among various parties to control carbon dioxide, we are going to go past 200 in the next few years, and there is no indication of any change in the way we are doing things. It's going to reach what is called a critical level. By critical level, generally we mean when the global mean temperature goes 2 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial value. Why is this number being quoted? This is not a very precise number. We know that whenever the world has been warmer than 2 degrees in the past, there has been catastrophic changes in the Earth in terms of sea level rise and other problems. So generally, it is considered advisable to restrict the warming to about 2 degrees. And if you look at what's happening in the last 20 years, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change projects various scenarios about what will happen in the next 10 years. So in 2000, they made various predictions about how the warming may occur, depending on what policies we follow. And the black line is observation, and you can see that the observed rise in carbon dioxide in the last 10 years goes along a line which was the highest in the scenario. That is, we are paying no heed to what's happening in the past. We are continuing to behave as though we can do whatever we want. And so this is the concern that all of us have, is that in spite of all the warnings that have come from IPCC and others, this one, the human beings are continuing to put out CO2 at the rate of 2 parts per million per year, and it's increasing. Now we come to who are the people contributing to the increase. And in the last 10 years, the major contributor is China, because it is growing so rapidly, economic growth is so rapid. And so it has overtaken America, and America has a very high CO2 emission rate next to China, but it's not growing because the society is quite developed. And next is Europe, and India is coming in this calculation score into the list. But notice that India's contribution to the global emission is very small, maybe of the order of 5%. So that we keep in mind when we discuss what India should do about climate change. Now, the consensus of scientists is that if we have to prevent the 2 degrees centigrade warming of the Earth, to keep it below that to avoid any catastrophe, then we have to do something fairly quickly in the next 10 years to go along this green line. We have to change the way we do things so that the CO2 emission doesn't go on growing the way it's growing the last 20 years, and bring about a transition in all the economies of the world so that we go along that path. We went along the green path or even blue path, it's possible that you avoid any kind of climate change. So that is the expectation. But if we don't do that, so the blue line is where we will land up in the next 100 years if we took proper action and cut down the CO2 emissions. And red line is where we are going, where we are going today. So the difference is between 2 degree warming and 6 degree warming or 5 degree warming. And this difference is very large. 2 degree warming itself will pose some problems to countries like India, but I can tell you that 5 to 6 degree warming will make things really unbearable for many countries in the tropics. Now, why are we concerned about more than 2 degrees warming? One example I can tell you of the large uncertainties that can happen to Earth's climate is that large amount of methane is trapped in the soil in Central Asia, Siberia and other places, and they have been frozen for the last 10,000 years, since the last ice age. Now, if the Earth temperature goes over 2 degrees, all that soil will stop. It will come out. The gas is trapped in the frozen soil. The soil not anymore frozen if there is a more than 2 degree warming, and all the methane starts coming out of the soil. And here's an example of a scientist showing by just lighting a match in front of a hole, it will light up when the methane is coming out. It's already happening in a small scale, and that will increase exponentially in the next 100 years if you continue to go along the path we are going. So this methane which comes out will cause additional warming of the Earth in addition to what is caused by carbon dioxide is already emitting. So this is something which we should remember, that if after 20-30 years and 2 degrees warming has occurred, and we all wake up and decide that we should be more careful and we stop CO2 emission, it will be too late. By the time methane is coming out on its own, and if you want to run away more, you can do nothing about it. And the other concern for many people in the tropics is that species which like high CO2 and high temperature are insects. And those of you who know what happened in summer in India, you know that. Here's an example of Japanese beetles feeding and mating on a soybean grown on elevated CO2 and also high temperature. So this is a major challenge for many countries in the world, and especially the tropics, that how do you deal with insect attacks at high temperatures, because once they come, they are not easy to stop. And to give an example, this is from Canada, where millions of hectares of forest are dead because of the advent of bark beetles, which have killed the trees, and those red colored area are dead trees, which will now become source for forest fires. And this was experienced in Russia, the huge forest fire near Moscow that occurred a couple of years back. And these are areas much, much larger than many Indian states. And these are fires which no human being can control. Once they start, they just keep going and they will die on their own. They will not be controlled by human beings. Now, we in India also have to worry about more than 2 degrees warming because most of India is in what you might call tropical seasonal forests, mostly savanna, most of India. And all it takes is a decrease of rainfall by around 30-40% and an increase in temperature on this axis, about 5 degrees, to turn a savanna into a desert. So many parts of India are already in that borderline semi-arid regime, and if the temperature goes up another 2 degrees or 3 degrees and the rainfall falls, you'll be getting a desert domain. So we have to worry about it. The other concern, of course, is agriculture, and it's well documented by research done by research in Delhi by Indian Agricultural Research Institute that increase in temperature brings down the yield of rice and wheat and other crops by a substantial margin. And here there's only a few degrees increase. If you go to 5 degrees and so on, it's going to pose a major challenge to agriculture. But the most important thing all of us will face in India is the heat stress, something which is not sufficiently discussed in the international forums because it's not an issue in Moscow or in London, it's an issue for India. Most parts of India in which people live along the coast, all from Calcutta to Bombay on the east coast, if the temperature in the ambient goes above 35 degrees centigrade and the relative humidity approaches 100%, all of us know it's very difficult to live. That's because your skin temperature has to be below 35 if you want to maintain your internal body temperature at normal values. At 31, 80 if you want to maintain it, you had a skin temperature 35 because if it is above that, you can't get rid of the heat. Now, if the ambient temperature goes above 35 and the humidity shows 100%, then your skin cannot even lose heat by evaporation. So this situation is called heat death in the terminology of the American military, because in the Vietnam War, many American soldiers, young soldiers, died in the fields in Vietnam of heat stress. Because under humid conditions and carrying all their equipment and their battle fatigue, they were not able to maintain location. So if the India temperature goes up by 5 degrees, then large parts of India or coastal region will be almost unlivable in the summer period. Now, for those of us who live in air-conditioned offices and air-conditioned houses and air-conditioned cars, it should not matter. But for majority of the Indians who work on the field and who work in the factory where you can't afford air conditioning, this will be disaster. So this issue has not received attention. There's one example now my students worked on showing that the number of days about 35 in a place like Chennai will go 4 times if the temperature goes over 3 degrees. So these are issues we have to worry about if global warming goes beyond 2 degrees. The other thing which we have noticed in the last 50 years is a large increase in natural catastrophes like heavy rainfall events, floods and so on. And this particular show in Asia, this kind of event. And we know that as the temperature of the earth goes up, and along with that the humidity of the earth also goes up naturally, then the potential for large heavy rainfall events decreases. In India, in the last 50 years, the number of days with rainfall above 100 mm per day has gone up by 50%. And so this will continue to increase as temperature goes up. So this again has to be a serious concern. Those of you who are aware of what happened in Bombay, when almost 1000 mm fell in one day, which is unbelievable because it's more than the yearly rainfall of Bengaluru. So that large event occurred, and such things will occur more often. And the other concern for people living in coastal areas of Asia, and here is a picture of number of cities with population more than 100,000 and and million and so on, it's shown here. There are at least 21 cities above million population along the coast in Asia, and all these will have challenges now as the temperature goes up beyond 2 degrees and 3 degrees, the sea level rise will be more than a meter. And many parts of Bangladesh, East Coast, will be subject to large incursion of sea, and that's an issue which we will have to address also. And I think this is an issue which is not discussed much in public. If there is a more than a 1 meter sea level rise in the next 50 to 100 years, the only place people in Bangladesh can go to is India. There is no other country they can go to. And we have to look at that problem head on. We can not think about it. But as I told you, all bad news, I think it's not good to end on a bad note. So I'll end this part by pointing out good news. There was a land at a dispute between Bangladesh and India called South Kalapati. And both countries were claiming that border island. 2 years back, that island disappeared under sea level rise. So there's no problem. Okay? So there's one benefit of global warming. Okay, so having seen all these consequences, quite clearly we need to take action. And most of the time in India, the feeling is correctly that we hardly contribute 5% to the carbon dioxide emission of the world. So the problem is not ours, problem is elsewhere in the developed world. But the way the problem is formulated with the developed world is as given here. The combined emission of all developing countries and non-developed countries have shown that beyond 2005, the amount of emission by the developing nations already exceeded that of developed nations. So they are turning around and telling us India is also a part of the problem. Okay? And this is, to me, a somewhat misleading graph because you are putting essentially out of 7 billion population, 6 billion in one category red and 1 billion in other category. And they say you 6 billion are emitting more. Also you will emit more because there is 6 billion population. But this is the dialogue at international level that if you have to cut down CO2 emission, their argument is that both developing countries have to play a role. And so that's where the stalemate is right now stuck at. And this is a well-known cartoon in which people developed countries are saying that they made many mistakes. I hope you won't repeat it. And we are saying, no, we will follow your mistakes back to the same route. And the other stress that is being made, interestingly, is on methane. Methane is also another gas which is emitted from rice seeds and other sources. And there, of course, India and China are the world's leading emitters because we produce a lot of rice. So that's also another new angle being brought into debate. But it must be kept in mind that methane and CO2 are not in the same league. CO2 has a lifetime of 100 years, or even more, a couple hundred years. So any CO2 that is emitted today will be around in the atmosphere till the 22nd century. Methane is not like that. Methane is a highly reactive gas. It is emitted today, in 10 years it becomes CO2 and water vapor, and water vapor will probably condense. So methane, also a very potent greenhouse gas that is absorbed radiation from the earth, it is not as dangerous as carbon dioxide because of its short lifetime. So it can be easily corrected once we take action, but CO2 is not like that. So let's conclude this point by saying that here we are clearly in a dilemma that any warming above 2 degrees will have adverse impact on many aspects of life. But we can do nothing much about it because our country is only 6%. So as a country, what action we take or do not take in the next 30 years will make no difference. So beyond 2050, the different stories that we will come to at the end. So after 2050, next 35 years now, India's contribution is going to be so small that the particular direction we take as a country is not going to influence the global temperature. But I think what's important to recognize is not recognized by enough number of people that global warming is just a symptom of a much larger problem. The larger problem is the degradation of quality of air, water and soil all over the world, including India. So if you recognize global warming as merely a warning of the way we are doing things in India and abroad, and which has to be changed, then we don't have to worry about the fact that we only contribute 5% to the CO2 emissions. We are doing many other things in this country which is not good for us. Okay. So that's the focus of the second part of the lecture. That as far as global warming is concerned, it is true that all India can do is to try to persuade the major emitters to do something quickly so that there is no disaster forthcoming. But locally, we can do many things which have a local impact and not a global impact. That's because many things we are doing are leading to degradation of air quality, water quality, and soil. Now, interestingly, we have a leader who knew this well before anyone recognized. Well before the word sustainability was coined in the 80s, Mahatma Gandhi saw this problem when he went to England. So when he went to England and saw the standard of living in England, he realized that if we Indians, at that time we were only 300 million, not 1,200 million, if we Indians aspire for the standard of living of England in 1928, I'm talking about, we will exploit the world and strip the world bare and look at. This is a very profound remark by a very great thinker who understood the limits of human being. So he, as we all know very well, advocated a road to development which is different from what we are doing now. And I think it is high time we remember that person instead of on 2nd October on every day and recognize that a country of India's population 1.2 billion, occupying a very small area of the world in terms of, that is, our base world is very high. We cannot afford to follow road development that are adopted in Europe and USA. There is no way you can do it because there is not enough resource there. So now we come to the kind of local changes occurring, which is not due to CO2 alone. When you look at global climate change, carbon dioxide is the number one culprit. But when you look at global climate change, there are many other factors which play a role other than CO2. Now, this is the point I want you to remember. This is from the IPCC report. As soon as you go to smaller scales less than a million square kilometers, that is 1,000 per 1,000 kilometer area, you cannot attribute what is happening there to greenhouse gas alone, because local factors are playing a role. Only thing IPCC can say with great confidence is about global mean temperature. As it comes to local scale of about 1 million kilometers square and below, there are many other factors, completely local, which play more important role than CO2. That something is not recognized by many people. And in the Indian context, you must remember that not all parts of India are warming the way the globe is warming. That's because particulate matter called aerosols play a very important role in controlling local climate. And there have been changes in rainfall pattern. For example, Delhi, rainfall has gone up in the last 100 years. That's why Delhi's temperature has not gone up, it's actually gone down. You may not believe it, but it's true. And there's impact of urbanization, which is completely ignored by many people when they look at local climate change. And the best example I can take of urbanization impact is Bengaluru, where I've lived the last 50 years. In the last 100 years, the monthly mean minimum temperature in the month of March, for those of us who live in Bengaluru are totally pampered, March is the first month. Okay? And you in Delhi won't believe it, but March is the first month for us because the night temperature goes close to 20 degrees centigrade, and in the concrete houses we live in, it is quite unbearable. It's not a fan. Air conditioning is not in the picture right now. So this temperature has gone up by 2 degrees in the last 100 years. Remember that in the last 100 years, the global mean temperature has gone by 0.7 degrees. So the warming in Bangalore, 1.3 degrees is due to local and 0.7 degrees is due to global, if at all you can divide it in a simple way. So I would like to point out that 2/3 of the warming in Bangalore is not due to global causes, it's due to local causes. And that's most clearly seen by a picture drawn by my colleague Dr. T.V. Ramchandra, showing the urbanization built-up area in Bangalore in 1973. This is the red part is the built-up area, and see what happened in 36 years' time. The amount of green area converted into a built-up area is huge, and that's what is causing all the warming, and not the global CO2 increase. So what I want to highlight is that many of the local climate change we are witnessing in India has local causes, and we don't have to look for a villain outside the country. We are the villains, we have to act on our own mistakes. Okay? So, the other key factor is to remember that not all climate change we are witnessing locally is due to human causes, also natural causes, and CO2 is not only factor causing local climate change. And we'll just give you a few more examples from the rest of India. If you take all India mean temperature, which is a state quantity, you don't experience it, but you can look at it. You can see that in the last 40 years, temperature has gone much faster than in the previous almost 100 years. But Delhi, temperature declined. Now, I don't know how many years I think would have lived in Delhi. My father came to Delhi in 1940. He tells me it was almost a desert, not the green. The greenery is handmade. You people hijack the Yamuna River here and build all the greenery. This is not a natural situation. Delhi was a desert, and with all the greenery and irrigation, rainfall has increased, the temperature has gone down. So locally things depend on factors not on CO2 but on changes in soil types and so on, vegetation types. Now, one of the most important effects in India, North India especially, is the aerosol pollution, especially in winter. This is the satellite view of the haze that exists over the Indo-Gangetic Plain in December, all the way from Lahore to Dhaka. And this is occurring because winter air is more stable, so whatever pollution is created, it remains in the atmosphere for a long time because there is no rainfall. And this region going from Dhaka to Lahore is actually in a depressed area, about 5 meters below the Vindhyas here and Himalayas here. It's like a channel where pollution is trapped. So this also has influence on local climate because these aerosols scatter, scatter some radiation and cool earth. So some of the cooling you see in Delhi could be due to aerosols. Now, these aerosols are now being discussed because they are also playing a role in climate change, or local climate change. And I want you to understand how small they are. This is the size of a human hair, just enlarged, okay? I'm sorry. And what I'm showing is the cross-section of the hair, that is the circle, and the particles that you see in the atmosphere in Delhi and other places. These are this size. This is 10 micron size and 2.5. They're very small particles. And they influence the amount of radiation that falls on the earth. That's one part. But I'm going to now highlight something more serious, which is not sufficiently recognized. They have a huge impact on health. Now remember that human beings evolved on this earth for a long period. They were not designed to inhale such small particles. Okay? Our nose and the mouth and the lungs are designed to handle large particles, about 10 micron. Anything below 10 micron gets into your system, cannot be removed easily, and has huge impact on your health. And among the most polluted cities in the world, between most smaller in Asia, mostly all of them have this particulate pollution due to aerosol. And this is happening mainly because among our policymakers, politicians and thinkers, there is a general impression that pollution is a price you must pay to progress. I heard very often people say, it's all right, these things are not bad because we want to develop. These things will happen. Okay, so this is the impact of aerosols on global mean temperature. As a matter of fact, if the aerosols were not there, the global mean temperature was higher. So many of the aerosols actually cool the earth. But some of the aerosols, which we in India a bit more than others, is this soot, black carbon, that heats the atmosphere. So that has recently become a very important issue politically. But again, remember that these aerosols, in terms of climate, they are not as big players as CO2, because they exist only for a few weeks. So again, this can be fixed very easily if you decide to make up mind. This is not something which has long-term impact. If you decide next 5 years that will cut down the aerosol, its impact can be removed within a matter of few weeks. But the effect of health of these aerosols is not sufficiently well appreciated in India at least. Both in Europe and in America, because they appreciated the role of aerosols in health, there are very strict laws, air pollution laws now which have cut down these particulate matters. But in India they have not been done, because I think even among doctors in India, I find a lack of awareness about how serious this is to our health. All of you are aware that over the last 25 years, whatever data has been collected shows clearly the number of cases with cardiac problems has increased rapidly in this country. And Indians as a group get heart problems at a very early age. And whenever I talk about this issue with doctors, majority are of the opinion that this is due to genetic factors, due to our lifestyle and other reasons. I find it hard to believe it. I'm not a doctor, but I find it hard to believe it. Because if you look at the global picture, the per capita meat consumption in this country is 1/10 of the world's average. Surely diet is not an issue. There are a few rich fat guys, you forget about that. But majority of the Indians are not eating enough meat for meat to be an issue in their diet. So I find it difficult to believe that that is causing cardiac problems. But this is evidence which has already been shown that if you inhale all these particles, your blood viscosity goes up, your heart rate varies, your blood pressure goes up, and there are clear markers of inflammation and thrombosis in your, all these have been documented. Okay. But some in India is not well placed. And the best result done in a long-term study says that a 10 microgram per milliliter increase in the particulate matter is associated with 8 to 18% increase in mortality due to heart problems mainly. Now, remember this 10 microgram. In Delhi, in the month of November, December, and even January, you will have in the atmosphere something close to 100 microgram per milliliter. That's the content of particulate gas, all the way from here till Dhaka. So to me, this is a serious issue which is not received sufficient attention, and this should have been given a lot of priority in our thinking about this is also a climate change issue, but global climate change issue, but some are not giving enough attention. Now there are other data showing the increase in death from cardiovascular disease, and that also clearly shows, depending on what population you look at, anywhere from 80% to 20% increase in cardiac problems among people in Asia. Now these are studies done not in India, unfortunately, done abroad, where they have excellent data over the last 30-40 years of cities with different amounts of particulate matter. And these are carefully documented studies, so these are quite reliable. Now, you might want to believe that we are genetically superior, somehow we will not have such high impact. I don't think so. I think the effect of particulate matter is on the human system is fairly across different groups. So I'm sure these efforts are being seen, but we are ignoring it because we don't have proper. In India, we don't have a good database to connect the particulate pollution to cardiac and other problems. Now, I want to end this talk by talking about ways we could have developed into the way we are developing. As I said, I will not talk about global climate change because I believe we cannot do much about it except to hope that we can convince other countries to cut down their CO2 emissions. But local climate change, definitely we can do something about it. It's in our control. And my belief is that when India became independent in 1947, our politicians and policymakers should have done careful study of what are the what you might call the potential for growth in India in various sectors. And if you look at a country like India, which is a large population and area not so large compared to other big countries like China and USA, we should ask our question is, where do we get our energy from? It can be from coal. Coal we have is a very poor quality, one of the poorest quality coal in the world. It can be from oil because oil resources here are very poor. And not can it be nuclear? Nuclear also, our uranium resources are very limited. So if they had done a very objective study of what is the future in this country, the only energy which we have available in plenty is solar. There is no energy available as much as solar. But somehow the initial years, this issue although did get some attention in Delhi, but it soon lost interest because the impression that was created by many people, among them scientists, that solar is impractical. Solar is too dilute a source, we don't have enough land, and the method of conversion of solar to any form of energy is too inefficient. Now the last statement may have been true in 1947 partly because the solar technology was not so well developed. So because of that, we completely neglect solar as an option in this country for a long time. Wind is an option, but in India, on account of the monsoonal climate we have, winds are there only for 3 to 4 months a year. And rest of the year wind is not very good. So still wind has changed a lot in India, surprisingly, because of the special tax rate given to wind technology that developed. But as an energy source for India, it's not very large. Now this beautiful article which was written in Sunday American by Professor Jacobson from Stanford, he showed how America can completely become free of fossil fuels by 2030, just 20 years time. I'm sure a similar roadmap can come to India, because India has more solar resource than USA. But somehow it was not. That's why only now in the last few years, the government of India, in response to the last IPCC report, did wake up and started a new mission called the Solar mission, which has started a few years ago. And so I'm very happy for the first time the government recognized solar as a potential for India's future. Now, why is it so important? Because in terms of any other energy resource, you take coal, oil, solar has the highest amount of value. The surface or the size of the energy resource, you cannot beat that by any other source. Nuclear or coal or oil, they're all limited. The solar is there all the time. And I don't know how a country can afford to go on importing oil. Right now, I can't give the number. I downloaded this from the website. So India is spending $120 billion to import oil. Now I can't say how a country of this size you want to grow based on oil alone can sustain this. I don't see a want that. You have to create new avenues for exporting something, not import so much oil. So I don't think this is a sustainable option at all. But as I said, right from the beginning of independence, these are the prejudices that are against solar. It's not efficient, it's not reliable, land requirement is large, availability is poor, and it's expensive. Now it is true that in 47 some of them are true. Solar energy was expensive in 47. It was inefficient. Not reliable is a term depends on what you mean by reliability, because we live in a country where all of us use power cuts. So I don't think we are reliable that Americans are looking for. So to me that is not an issue in this country where power cut is a very common feature. But the major objection was that land requirement is large. That's completely wrong. And other thing that was completely forgotten by our political leaders, which surprises me, is the fact that solar technology creates jobs. It's a very labor-intensive technology in contrast to nuclear or oil technology, highly skilled technologies. Solar is a very simple technology, requires lots of low-skilled labor. So an estimate from California is that for the same amount of money invested, solar technology creates 10 times as much job as, let's say, oil technology. Now, this is a paper in Current Science by Professor Srinivasan, former director of IIT Bombay, who compared how much area is required to generate power through solar in India. And his estimate, which I think is underestimated in my opinion, is that if you look at today's energy generation in India, around 1,000 terawatt hours, and that can be supplied according by around somewhere between 10,000 to 20,000 square kilometer of land. This is not large amount of land. As a matter of fact, I made an estimate, the amount of land that has been submerged by dams in the last 50 years is more than this amount. So this is not an issue at all. This is a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. Now, under the Governor Nehru's mission, we are planning to install about 20 megawatts by 2020. I thought we will do it because many government programs don't see the target. But the point has been made by a Swiss NGO, CBGM, that India has about 17 million grid power pumps and close to 7 million diesel power pump sets. And only 1,500 solar pumping systems. So they estimate that if you can power all of them by solar, that is the solar power that we will require. That is what they say will be the demand in the future years. And I agree with that estimate. We have to be very sort of ambitious in what kind of goals we want to reach. But this maybe is ambitious we should talk about. Now, the reason why this is looking very promising today is because over the last 20 years, the price of solar electricity has come down dramatically. 30 years ago, we were somewhere here, in this domain somewhere here, when the amount of solar, this is 1978, and today we have come down very rapidly, and today our solar electricity price is going to approach, is already below that of diesel power generation, and in a matter of under 10 years, it will come down below the price of coal, provided we take into account the full environmental impact of that thing in India nobody talks about. Coal power generation does huge environmental impact that you won't know much in Delhi, although part of your power plants are coal based. But the real impact is seen in the mining regions of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. And some of you should go and see what kind of open cast mining is going on there. Each time you switch on your light, please remember what kind of damage you're going to use light to get that one water problem. Now, the other thing that has happened in the last 10 years which is very, very promising is the efficiency of solar cells have shot up. Initially, solar cell efficiencies were hovering around 5% and 10%, and in the last 2 years, we have got solar cells in the market going up to 45%. And this is going to increase further because our understanding of solid-state physics and our ability to produce cells, mass-produced cells in a cloud way has gone up. And so I expect in the next 2 years, the solar cells will exceed 50%. So surely efficiency has gone up, so you can less area than before. Now, the other thing about solar technology for a long time was the fact it was not reliable, because we didn't have enough number of actual case studies to show that solar technology will last long. Now, fortunately, California, always a leader in many technologies, put up a solar thermal power plant, not photovoltaic power plant, in 1980s. It was done because the governor at that time was very far-sighted, who gave tax incentives. And this power plant is running for the last 30 years almost. And it has had no problem at all. It's a very reliable system. And so we now know today that solar technology is technically viable, economically viable, and reliable. And what it requires is a kind of advantage and incentive that is given in this country to coal, oil, and nuclear. If you see the amount of R&D invested in coal, oil, and nuclear compared to solar, the ratio looks 100:1. So solar never received the kind of incentive recently, never the kind of incentive that was given to other technologies. So once you recognize the cross other technologies, I think, and you invest in large ways, you will find that you can go almost completely solar. And just to give an example, my role model for a country is Germany. Germany is a country because of an interesting reason. There is a party called Green Party, which gets 10% of the votes from the public. It is amazing. I don't think our country will get 10% from Green Party. They manage to exploit the coalition politics to their advantage. They support one of the other ruling parties, and they insist that they go renewable. So Germany is the only country which has a very clear-cut policy on renewables for the last 15 years, And here's an example of a solar park, a very huge one. And just so that you appreciate the size of the park, there's a 747 aircraft standing there. So that large a power park. And they have put many of these, and what Germany has done is very cleverly, they have located some of these parks close to a hydro power plant. The idea is that whenever they have excess power, they pump water back to the dam. So hydropower acts as a storage medium for solar. Now this is India's plan for the government international solar mission, and we are somewhere here 2013, 2012 we should have gone to 1000 megawatts. We have not yet reached that stage, but already there are problems because of the way the technology has adopted has not been quite well done. But I'm expecting that there will be mid-course corrections and we'll go on this path. But what I would say is even here we have started late. Now, if you want to compare a country with India, that has been China, or this country which started in a similar way as India, and the Chinese have gone way ahead of India in solar. Okay. As a matter of fact, I would say today China is the world leader in solar power generation, and as a matter of fact, most of the photovoltaics we are buying today in India is from China. And I think China has decided that originally China was hoping to take resources from the rest of the world, oil or coal, to feed its energy requirements. But 2 years ago, they recognized that this cannot be sustainable. So they have gone on a big way for both wind and solar, and in solar they are now the world leading producers. And because of their role, the price of solar has come down. And here is an example of annual solar cell production, and you can see China is, India is not in this hall, and China is 11,000 megawatts in 2010 is already gone up, I think close to 15,000-20,000. So to me, we have to take some leave out of China's example and realize that we have to be energy self-sufficient and cannot depend that our future will depend upon importing either coal or oil. As a matter of fact, if you recall a couple of years ago, when coal from India was very poor quality, many of our companies decided to import coal from Indonesia or Australia or Africa, and that is a disaster because the price of coal has gone up dramatically in the last 2 years. So you can never ever depend on a foreign resource for the energy requirement. And the last example I want to give you, folks who say that solar is not good for India because land is not available. Nobody said that when solar technology is used, that land cannot be used for any other purpose. Here is a beautiful example of a solar concentrator in which you can use that area for also agriculture or grazing or any other purpose. As long as you don't use fixed system, this is what you're doing now. If you use a tracking system, you can easily combine solar with any other requirement. After all, we all know that in India, whenever we try to acquire land, so obviously there are big challenges of displacing people. To me, solar does not do that. You have to involve the local farmers and local residents in this partnership. They can use the land, you can use the land, you can lease it out. Now, the best example of this is the mobile towers. I mean, there is what? Maybe 50,000 towers in this country now. So they all came in the last 10-15 years. And they are all on lease land. Nobody is buying land for that purpose. And these technologies essentially are like mobile towers. Just put a tower and put your solar concentrator, and it will get you power, and you can use the land for any purpose that you want. So to me, that is the future that we have to go to. I think I will stop on that note. I'll just again repeat the main conclusion. One is, as far as global climate change is concerned, India cannot do much because you can put so little to the global CO2 emission. That is as far as the next 30 years is concerned. But if we continue to go along the path we are going today, then beyond 2050 we also will cause a problem. So all I'm advocating is that well before 2050 we start a different path of renewable energy technology and move away from coal, oil and nuclear, and thereby reduce air pollution, reduce the degradation of land. And one important thing I want to point out is that if you depend more and more on coal and nuclear power plants, you need a large amount of cooling water. It's not available. There's only so much water we have in this country. If you follow solar photovoltaic route, not solar thermal, then you don't even need cooling water. Because solar photovoltaic does not require much water because water cleaning but nothing else. So if we follow that route, then we will follow a route in which we will minimize air pollution and requirement for water, which is going to be a major issue in this country. Thank you.